in, but welcome on this lovely Thursday morning to Brunch and Learn. I'm Becky Sims. I'm founder and CEO here at Reflect Digital. We are a digital marketing agency, and our superpower is understanding humans and using that to supercharge strategies. So we're going to talk a lot about humans today. So yeah, this is a fun session. I'm going to ask for a bit of interaction, so please interact with me. Don't worry, nothing too scary, just comments in the chat or answering a poll. I will try and make time for questions at the end. We ran this last week and it did run to time, so I'm happy to stay on a bit longer if people are still here and have questions, or you can follow up with us. At the end, we'll definitely put a survey up. We'd really like you to give us some feedback. And if hopefully you've received your brunch boxes. If you selected one, thank you so much to Chantel and the team for getting those out. They looked amazing. Feel free to tuck in. If you've already tucked in, that's cool. If you're saving it, enjoy it when you have it. But yeah, let's get cracking. I am gonna just go to the slides, so just bear with me a second. I'm going to do that normal thing of, can everyone see my slides? I'm just going to put them into slideshow mode, but you can all see them okay? Amazing. Perfect. Well, let's get cracking. So we are talking today about marketing in a downturn and how to set ourselves up for success, really, and give ourselves the best opportunity to have the best time through this difficult time that we can for our businesses. Everyone on the call today is an e-commerce business, so we'll bear that in mind as well as we're talking and what this means. And I think the thing is, we're all feeling the pinch, no matter where you sit from how much money you have. Like, you can't help but notice when you go to the supermarket how much things are costing. When you pay for petrol, that's awful, isn't it? I'm quite glad I've moved to electric, although that brings you onto your electricity bill. We're all feeling it. And the thing is, history tells us that now is not the time to stop marketing. So I'm not going to spend too long on talking about this, because we've all seen there's loads of articles at the moment about this, bringing back stats from previous recessions or even the pandemic more recently. This stat's a great one back from the 1980s, showed that businesses that maintained or increased their marketing spend had sales that were 256% higher than those that didn't. And that was a couple of years after the recession. So there's lots of stats that prove this, because why would you want to disappear from your customers' minds? And that's the key thing. We want to stay front of mind. And I love this quote. It's a Henry Ford quote. I feel like all of his quotes are questioned whether it was actually him that said it or not, but whoever said it, stopping advertising to save money is like stopping your watch to save time. Like, it doesn't work. And it will catch up with you. You won't notice it immediately. You could stop it all today and things would carry on. But depending on what your cadence is between inspiring someone and then wanting to go on to buy, you will start to see that drop off. And it's not a good idea. I've just put some stats in here that I thought were really interesting at the moment. So these were e-consultancy stats that were released a few weeks ago, end of August. I think they were polled at April time. And these were of senior marketers, asking them what their thoughts were on whether they expected marketing budgets to change over the next couple of years. And surprisingly, people are thinking they're going to increase. So 17% increase considerably, 43% increase slightly, 24% stay the same. So this was obviously before we knew how much of a recession it felt like we were falling into, but still this optimism fills me with hope, which is good. And then here we've got a second graph of data that they collated, and this was just looking at what were the most important areas. And I was just really encouraged to see this, that we had data and insight driven decision making, which is great because we need that. Don't want to be too reliant on data sometimes, but it's important to have it there. Then improving customer experience and customer journey management, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And then maximizing marketing efficiency or effectiveness, optimizing your budgets. So interesting that people are on the money to what I would expect to be the key things right now. So the key thing that I want everyone to remember coming out of today is everything you are feeling personally, and those around you and your friends, your family, your colleagues, everything everyone is feeling, your customer is likely to be feeling too. So remembering that you may not be the customer that would buy from the business that you represent and the business that you work in, or if you were an agency, the many businesses that you help and represent, but you can still remember on a human level that they're feeling similar things. So let's start with a tiny bit of interaction. And as I said, please don't leave me hanging. Now, this is, I want you to put some comments in the chat, or you can come off mute and talk to me if you'd like to. But what do you think your customers are feeling currently? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so that I can see what people put in the chat. But just pop some, there can be single words, it can be sentences, but just what do you think? And maybe you've done some research. Like, it'd be amazing if some of you have already started to ask your customers about what it is that they're feeling. But it'd be great to just hear, because in a minute I've got some predictions of what I thought. But yeah, so I can't justify spending on non-essential items, 100%. Bethan, I agree with that. Rising everyday costs, yeah, they're just everywhere, isn't it? In some ways, like the news has dropped off because of what's happened sadly with the Queen, but actually once that's moved on, I think the news will be back to that feeling of just constant worrying about cost of living. Apprehension for the coming months, definitely, especially coming up to Christmas as well. We all know that's an expensive time. We target both B2B and end users, so probably worried about their jobs and managing costs, yeah. Anxiety about increasing prices, wanting to help support our charity, but difficult finding spare money. 100%, I resonate with that. We had a door knocker at the house yesterday from a charity, and you just feel really stressed by it, because it's like, oh, I'd love to help, but you've got to watch everything, haven't you? It's no, that's some really good feedback. Right, let's go back. I'm going to come back to my slides for a second. So my second question, I'm not going to bring them back up, was just also, what do we think our role as marketers is? So with slightly with that lens, but in general, what is it, the jobs that you all hold, what is it that your boss or the leaders of your business really expect you to do as a marketer? What is it that they lean on you for? We'd love to just get, again, can be single word answers, could be sentences, but just some thoughts on what it is that we're employed to do when we work in marketing. So try and reach new audiences and customers. Yeah, nice, Josh, like that. Spread awareness, grow brand awareness, drive results, increase traffic, drive revenue growth, show impact. Yeah, this is great. Increase revenue. We have to do a lot, don't we? Amazing. Right, I'm going to put you all off the hook for now. So if you put anything else now, I'm not going to see it for a second. So bear with me. I'm going to just put the screen back up and give me a little thumbs up if you can see them again. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Cool. So we know what our customers are feeling roughly. We're starting to feel that. We know what our job is. So let's just see whether my predictions were right. So this was more on what our role as marketers is. So to execute campaigns targeted at our desired audience or audiences, to drive ROI. We get talked about that a lot, don't we? How can we prove what we're doing is working? To be creative. Everyone thinks everyone that works in marketing is ready to get their colouring pencils out and be creative, come up with ideas. So yeah, that's one of the asks on us. To drive customer retention. Now this one for me is one of the ones that will be more important right now, because we've got to hold on to the customers that we already have, because as we know, it's always cheaper to keep a client than it is to win a new one or keep a customer. So thinking about how we can drive retention. To spin plates. We're always spinning plates when you work in marketing. There's a million and one things to be thinking about. And then this is the last one, to show customer empathy. And this is the one for me where the best results can be found. This is at any time, but most importantly, at a time like now, when we need to come together as communities, we're worried, everyone's feeling pressure. This is the most important one, that we've got that customer empathy and we get that line right. So it's my belief that as a marketer, if you do not focus on those humans that sit behind your campaigns, that you are failing your audience. You're missing what it is that they expect from you as a business. And at the end of every campaign, you have to remember, is a human. Every analytics number, also a human. So we can get wrapped up sometimes, especially in the digital world. We're seeing numbers all the time and we're looking at data and trends, but those numbers that we see are humans. They have feelings and they have motivations that drive them to do things. And that's what we want to look at today. And for me, this is the best bit. This is the exciting bit, remembering that we have this audience that are just like us. And maybe they're not like us. Maybe they're slightly different to who you are. Maybe it's a different type of audience, but they're humans. They still think and feel like we do. So we use behavioural science at Reflect Digital, and I guess a good starting point is, what is it? What is behavioural science? Because it sounds interesting, doesn't it? I love this quote. So it's a very new science of a very ancient subject. Yeah, we've been around a long while. We might not be ancient ourselves, but as a species, we're very ancient. And this is a really new science. It was first mentioned kind of in the early 1900s, and it was called behavioral psychology at the time. And then it wasn't until the 50s where it started to gain traction. You had people like Kahneman and Tversky who came up with nudge theories start to come out, and it really started to gain momentum from the 1950s. But you think in the world of science, that's really new compared to some of the other sciences that have been around a lot longer. And it's the scientific study of human behavior. It's analysing the different stimuli that cause such behaviour. So why, when X happens, do humans tend to do Y, or specific groups of humans act in certain ways? And when we understand that, we can start to tailor experiences, because we know how people are more likely to react. Obviously, it's never guaranteed. We're all different. We're all human. We all have our own ways of reacting to things, but it's a way of trying to start to find what are the patterns. So let me share a hard truth with you. Your customer does not care which channel they find you on. And this can be difficult sometimes for marketers, especially if you're more specialist in a particular area. You can get really wrapped up in loving your own channel and thinking, yeah, this is the most important thing. But actually, your customer doesn't care. The thing that the customer cares about is that they find the right solution that answers what it is that they're looking for, and that they find it at the right time, in the right place. So it basically means we need to be mind readers, because the right place is wherever they are at the time that they need it. And they don't know where that is, and we don't know where that is. So we need to be mind readers. We need to start to uncover what that journey looks like, and the likely places and the likely actions that they're going to take. So let's go over something we all know: the traditional funnel. We've all seen this before, where you go from awareness through to consideration, evaluation, where they go on to want to buy or inquire. And then we want to look at how we can retain them and make them advocates for our brand. We've then got the digital funnel. So this is just my example of a digital funnel and this will be different for every business, but thinking about which channels tend to work really well. So awareness, SEO tends to be the hero at awareness, because we can spend time to really optimize big keywords that have got high search volume, that are those maybe questions that people are asking. They're not sure that they're ready to buy, they're just researching something. And SEO tends to be a cost-effective way to do that, because paid media, we can do some of it, and I've put here more targeted, because if it's too broad, we don't really want to pay for the audience too much, because we have no guarantees if that's likely to turn into a sale or not. So it's difficult to pay for each click. And this is about being found earlier in the journey. Then we go on to when they're getting closer to making a decision, they're starting to show more intent in the way that they search. This is where SEO and paid media start to work together really well. SEO may have been able to capture some of those positions, but it might also be that we need paid media to fill in some of those gaps. But here we're being present, we're starting to build knowledge, show them that we know what we're talking about, build trust. And this is where, at this point in the funnel, that we want to make sure that we're using the right channels to deliver that, because still paid might be a bit expensive for us here. And then finally, we come on to, well, not quite finally, but the key part of the journey initially, especially for an e-commerce business, is where we're going to make the sale. And here we want to make sure all channels are present, that we're ready. We're ready for the customer when they're ready, so that we're there for the conversion. And then it's the same that once they've bought from us, we want to also be there across all channels at the right time. We don't want to flood them with information and ads, etc. But it's the fact that we're still there in their lives. Maybe it's that we've got content that's going to help them use our product or make the most out of it, whatever it is that we're selling, or we're going to help inspire them to share with their friends. We then have the human funnel. So sorry, my clicker stopped working. The human funnel. So this is thinking about what is it actually from a human point of view we are trying to do. So at awareness, we're trying to create memories here, because at this point, and you'll know for your own sales cycle, maybe you're selling something that costs a couple of pounds and they buy quite quickly. This might be slightly different, or you might be selling something that's a long life cycle. Maybe it's a 3 months, maybe it's 6 months before they're going to buy. Therefore, creating memories early on in the funnel is really important. And to do that, we need to disrupt, we need to grab their attention, and we need to evoke some emotion, because it's those things that will help to create memories. When we feel something, we're much more likely to remember it. If we just see it, and it's as we're scrolling through social or scrolling on Google, it's just going to disappear quite easily from our minds. But if it's something that has made us feel something, we'll be much more likely to remember it. Then we go on to the stage where we want to build a relationship. We want to become their friends. So here we're wanting to demonstrate knowledge. We're being helpful. We're building trust. We don't want to be trying to sell too quickly. And again, it's going to depend on your product. So this is where you need to understand what it is that you're selling and how that relationship works. But if it's something that they need to take time over wanting to think about and learn about to be sure that it's the right thing, then we can't be going for the sale too early. We want to be building that relationship. Then we need to make it feel like the right decision from a human point of view. So when we think they're ready, when they've seen enough, when they know enough, when they've got to a certain point in their journey, we need to make it easy for them to convert. But we also need to look at how, through the language that we use, especially through that checkout process, we can reaffirm that they're making the right decision. So we get them to the end of it. And even once they've made the purchase, the email marketing piece that they get, the email confirmation, making sure that that makes them feel like they've made the right decision. Because especially in e-commerce, one of the scariest things is that we'll send them the item and then they're going to return it. So we want to try and stop that post-purchase regret. We want to try and make sure that they're bought into what they've bought and that they feel like it's the right decision, and that we're going to delight the customer when it arrives. So all of that is part of that journey. And then we want to continue to do all of the above. So continue to be helpful, continue to grab their attention, continue to evoke emotion where we can, because again, depends how often they're going to come back to you and buy something, depending on the type of products that you sell. But we want to stay in their mind, whether that's to get them to buy again, to get them to tell their friends. But you all know when you've bought something and you just cannot remember the business, they just disappear into the ether, they've gone. You can't bring them to mind, and that's because they haven't done a good enough job of their brand resonating with you and being able to make that connection. So each stage of the funnel requires different measures, and this is really important when we're thinking about our strategies going forward. And if you're, depending on where you're focusing your marketing efforts, or if you're doing work across the whole funnel, if we're going to start to have more of a spotlight on the money that we're spending and the results that we're generating, we need to be sure that we're managing expectations properly. We need to be sure that the business understands that awareness is something that helps feed the rest of the funnel, but sometimes it's really difficult to measure whether it actually generated a sale. It's more that we're looking for engagement, and you'll have your own metrics that work for that. But it's making sure that we're managing those expectations internally, because that's going to really help you as you go into this more tricky stage that we find ourselves in. And getting this wrong could damage your strategy. If you don't manage expectations correctly, you could have someone saying, well, I need to slash your budget in half. I don't understand what this part of the budget's doing. I can't see the return on it. If they don't understand what it is that you're expecting, what good looks like, which might not be sales initially, then how are they to know? So you need to just have a think about how you package that up and manage those expectations. So before we get on to marketing in a downturn, and we will get there, we've all been customers. It's really important that we remember that, whether we're, as I said at the start, might not be the typical customer of the business that we work for, represent, but we've all been customers. So I've got a question for you, and we're going to stick a poll up as to whether you use ad blockers. And I would love everyone to answer this. I'm just going to answer it myself so it disappears. Because I always find this really interesting. I ask this as often as I can when I do events, because I just find it intriguing as to what marketers say. So let's see, have we got any results in, Chantal?
We've had 16 responses. I'm just going to give everyone a minute.
Amazing. The suspense.
Still coming in. So.
Oh, we've got a fire alarm, but that's a test, so we're safe. Good to know it works though.
Yeah. I was like, oh God, please tell me no.
Lucky it didn't set my dog off either.
Okay, looks like everyone's in. So we've got 58% saying no, 26% saying sometimes, and 16% of people saying yes.
Good. Okay, so that's higher no's than last time, which is really good. So everyone that said yes or sometimes, oh, I'm just going to close that down so I can change the slides. Everyone that said yes or sometimes, please turn off your ad blockers, because, and you'll like this, hopefully, this is a great analogy for you, but when you see ads, this is your version of going to the gym. This is your gym workout. This is you being at the top of your game and maintaining match fitness, because you need to be seeing ads to be thinking, what do I like? What don't I like? What grabs my attention? What do I just miss? What resonates with me? All of those things, even if the ads that you are seeing are from a sector completely different to the one that you work in and that you're marketing, there's lessons to be learned. And I think it's so important to be on the receiving end of advertising when you work in marketing, because if you're not receiving that and you're not getting a chance to dissect that and think about what you see, you're just missing out. And this is the easiest gym workout you'll do. So it's definitely worth doing. And especially now more than ever, because we all know that in times of crisis and when there's difficult things going on, some brands are going to do really well, and they're going to do some amazing campaigns that we're just going to think, wow, they nailed it. But sadly, some brands are going to miss the mark. And you need to be seeing that and feeling that as a customer, because you need to learn from that, learn from others' mistakes to ensure that you then don't do something similar with your own brand. Because it's easy to be done. These ones where we see terrible mistakes happening. There was a boardroom of people that probably all signed it off saying, we think that's great and it's going to work. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't resonate. So you need to be thinking about that. So please turn off ad blockers. Go and be advertised to, as frustrating as it is sometimes. So what's the point of digital marketing? What is it that we do in digital marketing? Well, it's about grabbing attention. It's about sparking action. We want people to do something, and it's about evoking emotion, because emotion is going to lead to being able to create memories. And from a business perspective, it's about delivering return on investment. That's what the business wants to see. So it's your job to also weigh all those things up and be able to show that what you're doing makes sense. But all of this relies on human connection. All of it does. And it also relies on customer empathy. And that is the key, I think, at the moment, more than ever. Even in a B2B space where you might think, oh, it's a bit less touchy-feely than the consumer space, they're still humans. And humans aren't rational. We like to think we are. We like to think, especially at work, that we make these really rational, weighed up decisions. But we don't. We're very much, everything comes from our gut, from our heart. And it tends to be, if someone asks you why you did something, that you're post-rationalizing, you're making it up on the spot, because there's just an emotional drive that drives most things that we do. So I'm going to share with you a recipe to create your own luck, because marketing is partly about luck. And especially as we go into a time where things are a bit uneasy and unsure, we can't always rely on what we've known before. So there's definitely an element of luck. So let's talk about today. The news is full of recession doom. It's been everywhere, and it will go back to being everywhere in the next couple of weeks, I imagine. That wherever you turn, there's articles, news stories, radio, it's everywhere. And the idea for us is that we want to look at how we can protect our business and our budget, because we're going to need budget, and we need to ensure that those that are less savvy with marketing, that maybe are in control of budgets, don't go, yeah, we can cut marketing, we don't need that anymore. And we did see that at the start of the pandemic. A lot of businesses were cutting because they didn't know, they were worried, and it feels like this thing that you don't have to have. But as we know from some of the stats at the start, it is something that we need. So I'm going to talk to you about some research that was done. This was after the 2008 crash by a chap called John Quelch. And the QR code on here will lead you to the full piece of research that was in the Harvard Business Review. And I think he's nailed it. So he talks about the fact that there's 4 different groups of people. So we have got our slam on the brakes group. So these tend to be the most vulnerable and the hardest hit financially. And this group is going to eliminate spending in every way possible. They're scared, they're worried, they don't have much choice. They're going to be forced to stop spending everywhere they possibly can, to reduce down to the lowest value brand they possibly can. And this is likely to be our lower income consumers, but you will also find people that are maybe higher income that are highly anxious, that are worried. Maybe they're better off than they used to be, but they've suffered before and therefore they're scared. So it could be a wider range than just lower income people that sit in this group, but they will be eliminating, postponing, doing everything they possibly can to not spend money. We then have our pained but patient. So this tends to be a more resilient and optimistic group of people. They're optimistic about the long term, but they know we've got some pain to come. They know it's going to be difficult. They will still economize in all areas. They will be thinking about everywhere that they can drop spend or bring things down or pause things and come back to them later, but less aggressively than our first group of people. And these are going to tend to be the largest segment of consumers. So most households are going to fall into this bracket. And as things get worse, there's a worry that this group will fall into the slam on the brakes group. So there is opportunity to move between groups over the coming period that obviously we don't know how long things are going to last. So it's one to think about as well. So the majority of people are going to sit here. We've then got the comfortably well off. So these are people that feel really secure about their ability to ride out the time that we have ahead of us. They will continue spending near pre-recession levels, but things that might change their spending are, I don't know, if they tend to go out for dinner with friends, but they've got friends that sit in the first two segments, their friends probably aren't going to be going out anymore. So therefore they might not go out. So there's things like that that might start to affect them, but also these sensible, rational people. So they may also just start to pull back on certain things, but they're not going to be doing anything to the level of the first two groups we spoke about. These people tend to sit in that top 5% income bracket. So they're going to be feeling really confident about their finances and their ability to get through this. And then our last segment is the live for today. So this segment carries on as usual. Unless something happens, unless they suddenly become unemployed, these tend to be a more kind of urban, younger group of people. They've got less responsibility, less things that they need to pay for. They spend their money on experiences more than anything, but where possible, they are just going to be carrying on like there isn't anything going on around them. So those were our four groups of people. And the idea from today is that you can go away and start to look at your audience and look at where your audience sits. And the chances are you'll have people sitting in the different segments. Maybe you have a gut feel that they're sitting in the different segments, but you don't actually know. So you may need to think about, is there a way to sensitively do some research to try and understand where people are sitting? Because understanding this is going to be really integral to thinking about the type of messages that you put in front of your audience. You've also got the opportunity thinking about what type of business you are, and that comes on to thinking about the consumption of consumers. And John went on to look at the 4 different ways to look at consumption and the type of products, like where your products and services will sit. So we had, first of all, the essentials. So these are absolutely necessary for survival, or they're perceived as central to well-being. So this is food, this is heat, this is water running in your taps, this is being able to live your day-to-day life, this is being able to put fuel in the car if you need to drive to work, this is essentials to live your life. We've then got treats. So these are the indulgences whose immediate purchase is considered justifiable. So I don't know, you've just had an amazing week at work and you want to buy a dine-in for £10 from Marks and Spencer's, which might be an extravagance for you, but that feels like a treat where you say, do you know what, that's okay, we can do that, we deserve that, based on what's happened. So treats are things that you can justify. Then we've got postponables. So these are things that are needed or desired, but whose purchase can reasonably be put off. So this is things like, maybe, oh, we really need a new car, it keeps breaking down, but actually we could wait. Or maybe there's a bit of, I don't know, we could do new windows at home, but again, it could wait. It's things that you don't have to do today and you could put off. And then finally, we've got expendables. So these are perceived as unnecessary or unjustifiable. So this is extravagant holidays. This is buying a new car because you want to buy a new car. This is renovating your house because you want to renovate your house. So these are the types of things that are just unnecessary when you're watching your spending. You do not need to be spending on it. So you must then go on to profile where your products and services fit. And into which category, and whether you might have products and services that span the categories. You may be in one category. Those that sit in the first category are the ones that have got probably the biggest opportunity right now, and probably more to also think about in how to make the best of that situation, because you are going to have consumers moving down into your segment, and then you've got the opportunity to think about how do you make this not a bad thing. How do you make it that moving to this value product isn't a negative, but actually it's a positive, and they realize that, this is a great product, and maybe I'll stay here as a consumer for the foreseeable, because actually the cost doesn't mean that the product's any worse. So there's a real opportunity to start to, as you start to understand which category you sit in, to think about what you're going to do. And this, and we're going to send you these slides, so you'll be able to go and look at this. And obviously, if you follow the article through to the full article, there's quite a lot more detail on it as well there. But this chart just gives you an idea of the risk of sales downturning and the likelihood of behavior change. So slam on the brakes is where you're going to see the most change. This is where we've got the most to think about. So if that's your audience and you sit in postponables and expendables, there's a lot to think about here. And we'll carry on going through because there's some tips coming that will help you. So during a downturn, your loyal customers are critical. The worst thing you could do is alienate and lose those loyal customers, even if you think that they are going to need to maybe buy from somewhere else. Maybe they might not buy from you as often. They might start to see your business as a treat. We still need to make sure that we're in contact and we're trying to keep that relationship with our loyal customers. And building trust is one of the best ways to reduce risk, because people want to feel trust with the brand that they're buying for. They want to feel in a safe place. So really making sure that you are thinking about how to build trust. And your strategic opportunities are going to be defined by which groups your audience and products fall into. So that's why going away from today, starting to map this out, is really going to help you look at what your opportunities look like. And here we've got some suggested tactics. So this just gives you some ideas. So for example, slam on the brakes for treats. Maybe it's shrinking the sizes. So maybe if we, I don't know, took chocolate as a treat and something that people aren't always going to want to buy, but you sell really big packages, maybe you can bring the package size down, and that's going to make it easier for people to go, I don't know, the price is less now, I could buy this, rather than feeling like it's a more expensive treat. Playing on things like the mentality, you deserve it. So thinking about how you change your language, but ensuring you're being empathetic and not condescending in any way. There's a real fine line of empathizing with your audience, but not talking to them in a way that they feel like, well, I can still afford this. I don't need you to tell me I can't afford it, or think about it differently. So really wanting to walk that line carefully and understand that. So you've got this again that you could have a look at afterwards. Now is not the time to fundamentally change your proposition. It's a really dangerous thing to do, because that's where we're likely to alienate our loyal customer base and stop them, even if they move away from us or start spending a bit less with us now. We really want them to come back in the future. So if we alienate them, then they're never going to come back. They're going to be happier with their new choice, or they're going to find another brand that's similar to where you were, but not feel the trust and not feel supported by you to come back. But it could be a good time to think about releasing a new product or range. So again, this will depend where you are, what you've got in the plans, what the business has, but thinking about if you have something new that's relevant to now. So if you had a new exclusive expensive range, now is not the time to launch that. But actually, if you had something that was coming out, the ability to get greater share of voice, because some people will be dropping down a little bit in their level of messaging, is there is a great opportunity for that. But it needs to be the right product or the right range, or maybe it's maybe it is looking at pack sizes or the way that people buy your products. Now's the time for thinking about innovation in that way, but not evolution, like not revolution. It's more evolution. So what now? We know these things. What do we do about it? So you need to go map your audience and your products, and then you need to go back to revisiting your strategy. So strategy should always start with humans. You should always start with understanding your audience. So another Henry Ford quote, as I said earlier, I don't know if he said this, but I love this because if I'd asked the consumer what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. They didn't know. They didn't know that a car was coming. They didn't know that that was going to be mainstream and that we'd all be using them in the future. So your consumer doesn't always know what they want, and especially at a time like this, because they're scared and they're unsure of what the future holds for them. And we're all different. And we need to make sure that our marketing accounts for these differences, that we can consider making sure that we're talking to our audience in a way that resonates with them. So we have a unique persona model that we use at the lab group called Monkey, Lion, Dog. And this is based on 5 different psychology theories. And what this does is it gives you a new way of looking at language with your audience, because it helps you uncover their motivations. So it's playful in name, hopefully to make it memorable. But first of all, so you've got your monkey. So the monkey represents your customer's desire to be recognized. This is about status. This is about people like to be on a pedestal and people looking at them and want recognition. Purpose is really important to them. We've then got our lions. Now, our lions love to think that they're really rational and that all decisions are made up by weighing up the different decisions, and that they're in control of everything. So for anyone that felt really uncomfortable when I said that rational decisions don't really exist and it's all emotional, you're probably sitting more in the lion camp. And lions really want to master their craft. Achievements really important to them, feeling like they're making progress. So lions are going to be really concerned about messaging that's going to make them feel not good enough to be able to achieve something. And then finally, we've got our dog. And the dog group, well, anyone that's got a dog knows about the love that a dog has. And this is about the need that your customer has to feel connected to their friends, their family, to you as a brand, to the communities. They don't want to be rejected. They want to feel a warm hug coming from a brand. And dominant values here are affiliation or authenticity. So what you can do here, so first of all, you can go and take the test. You can find out where you sit. I will say that this, depending on what mood you're in, depending if you're in a more personal, like out of work setting, to if you were in a work setting, you might score differently. But what this does is it starts to give us a language around motivation, because we start to understand if our audience, if they are more motivated around status and wanting to feel like they've made it and that they really are at the top of their tree, as it were, then we need to think about that in how our messaging can resonate. So when we start to think about motivations, we can also start to think about that along the groups that we just talked about. So I've done this as an example because I think this can only be an example, because this is more about then layering this into your business, but thinking about the types of messages that might work. So for example, with slam on the brakes and essentials, there's going to be a real rational line there, rational thinking about I still need the essentials to live, but they're also going to be feeling highly emotional. So some of the dog messaging might work really well. And then if we go to the other end with expendables and live for today, that's all really about monkey and letting them continue to be who they want to be and live their lives and having a great time. And that's going to probably sit more in that segment. So just gives you a rough idea, but it's how you can start to think about layering the two models together. But how do you then layer motivations? Now, I've done an example here using, or I say our amazing team have done an example, because this is some great results that we got for a client, but using motivations in ad copy. So this is for one of our clients, Amicable. Now, Amicable help you do an amicable divorce. So instead of having huge lawyer fees, if you are still getting on well with your partner, but you just know that you need to separate, then this can be a really great way of doing it. Their old ad was just quite standard. It was just explaining what it is that they do. But through research that we did, we realized that trust was really important. So sitting more on the dog side, they really needed trust. But there was also a bit of lion of like, is this legal? Am I actually going to be properly divorced, or am I going to do this and find out in 3 years' time we're still married? So if you look at the new ad, you can see that we've done kind of get a consent order online. So really rational, like this can happen online. Number one trusted divorce service. We've got trust, and then legally binding agreements. We're showing again, this is lion, this is rational. You're going to have something that is legal. And then in the next bit of text, we've actually used a quote from a customer, again, showing trust. And as you can see, the results were phenomenal. So that's just one example of how you can start to use these motivations and layer them in to create better ad copy. And then I've also pulled these out. So this comes back to John Quelch's article around marketing in a downturn. And these are just some examples that DELL used back in 2008. I don't love all of these, but it gives you an idea of how you again could tailor your language based on knowing which group they sit in. But really just thinking about, is that the right thing to do? Because I feel like some of these maybe aren't quite right, but like out of the box within your means, yeah, maybe. But it just gives you an idea. It's an example. So then we understand our audience. We now need to go and look at customer journey. So we said back at the start, number 2 most important thing for marketers right now is customer journey. So we want to be able to map that journey. And here's an example of how we look at this. We run these as really interactive workshop sessions, working with your team, working with your customers, if we can speak to your customers, looking at data, but a lot of it also just comes from insight of understanding who your audience are. And you want to map the journey for the different personas so that you can start to think about, where are they spending their time? What is it they care about? What are their pain points, whether that's in light of the economy or if that's in light of the product that they're trying to buy. And as you start to map it, you start to see what's more important at each stage of the journey, and you start to uncover places that they're spending their time that maybe you haven't thought about, that becomes an opportunity for marketing, for, I don't know, creating content, outreach, etc. And this gives you a clear channel mix to test. So from this, maybe you'll have too many, maybe you can't do them all at once, but it gives you some channels to test. And this is where we need to start thinking about how the channels can play nicely together. So I always use this analogy. Imagine you're in a relay race and the user is the baton. Feels a bit mean making them the baton. But if you're in a relay race, if you've picked them up at awareness, maybe your SEO, maybe you've had the best, your number one keyword for something that's early awareness, you've grabbed hold of that baton. Now we need to have a think, how can you keep hold of it in your lane, in your business, in your ecosphere, in your content, so that they stay with you? How can you pass that on nicely to the next person? Do you need some remarketing to help you? Is it trying to capture their email address and using email marketing? How can you keep that touch point happening in your race lane rather than straddling into one of the competitors or somebody else's? And you want to just keep them moving in the right direction. So you need to be talking to the other channels. So maybe you're overarching marketing and this is your remit, great. But if you're sitting on this call and you're specialist in a particular area, go and talk to the other channels, talk about the success that you're having, but ask how they can help keep the customer moving. We recently won a Drum Award for doing just that, for the best integrated campaign. So you can go and have a read about that if you like. But this is something we're really passionate about. And this is about focusing on building a relationship, focusing on how you can become friends with your customer, make them trust you, believe in you. So then we go on to messaging and creative. We're not doing too bad for time. So if we think about format, now we know which channels we're using, we can start to think, what's the best format? Because it's not always a written article. Sometimes it's a video. Maybe it's a different type of ad to what you've tried before. Who knows? But think about the best format to get your message across. Then you start to layer in the motivation. So start to think about, we now know what motivates our customer in the scenario of what we're trying to sell them. Then we can look at choice architecture, so how you can use nudges. So I mentioned nudge earlier. So nudge is an amazing theory. There's a book written by Kahneman and Tversky, and it was updated by Thaler and Sunstein. There's nudges for everything. And government use this in creating policy, advertisers use this. The reason I've got fruit on screen here is just a really simple example of a nudge would be a supermarket putting fruit by the checkout instead of chocolate. That's not a mandate to say you can no longer buy chocolate. You can still go and find chocolate, but it's a nudge to healthy behavior, because we know when we stand in a queue at a checkout, we think, oh, I'm a bit hungry actually, I might buy something for now. And instead of having the choice straight away of chocolate, we've got healthy options. So that's an example of a real life nudge. So I'm going to just talk to you briefly about a few nudges. There's loads of nudges. There's so many out there. But first of all, disruption and expectancy. This plays into disrupting and creating memories, but it's having an ad that maybe the user didn't expect to see. Maybe it's a message they didn't expect to see. Maybe the graphics, something they didn't expect to see. But this is a really great way to grab attention and can work really, really well. We've then got loss aversion. So people value something so much more when they possess it than if they do not. So it's been proven that we hate to lose something more than we like to gain something. It's really, really key into how humans work. So thinking about how you can offer free trials, how can you get your product into the customer's hands? How can you make them more likely to want to hold on to it? The perfect example of this is why so many people have gym memberships and then don't get rid of them, even though they're not using them. It's because it's my gym membership. I don't want to get rid of it. And we had a great example a few years back as the lab group. We were working with Tesco Mobile, and we looked at how we could improve their ad copy. And one of the things we found is that people were really worried about how much their mobile contract was costing them. So we started to frame the loss. So saying your contract could be costing you money. And the results were phenomenal, because people suddenly were like, oh, I don't like the thought of my contract costing me money. I want to find out more. And then they were into a great landing page that carried on with that theme and converted them to want to be a Tesco Mobile customer. We then have anchoring. So nothing has a value until you give it one. And if you don't mention the value first and you give the customer time to think about what they think is a fair price, then they're in charge of that. They're in charge of thinking when they finally see your price, whether they think it's expensive or not. So really thinking about the fact that people anchor on that first piece of information that they see and being in control of that and trying to make it work for your business. This is why Starbucks, and since then all of the coffee companies and so many online software businesses will have 3 options, because that top option is really a decoy. That's there, not really expecting anyone to buy the most expensive one, but it's to kind of push you into the middle one, because no one wants to go for the cheapest one. It's why in restaurants as well, house wine doesn't always tend to be the cheapest, because they know people might actually be a bit worried about it being the cheapest. It might be slightly more expensive than the cheapest to make people again feel comfortable to buy it. And this is a great case study. So this was Razors for You. This was again as the lab group a few years ago. We went out and we did some research. We went on the streets of London and just asked people what their feelings were about buying razors. And most people were like, they're expensive. They're just this annoying purchase that I hate buying. So we came back from that with that kind of being the overarching feeling and thought, well, actually, this is a great opportunity because Razors for You are cheap. Plus, it's a subscription, so you don't even have to think about it. But what we did is we turned this into using the anchor. So lots of people in the research that we'd done had said, I don't know, I think they're like 15 quid, 20 quid. Everyone just had this higher expectation of how expensive razor blades are. So we made the ad copy, refused to pay, and then we tested different amounts. But we anchored them with this expensive amount, which then meant when you realize that Razors for You were actually only £9.45, suddenly it feels really, really cheap and you're really happy to pay this. And as you can see, these were some of the results. So conversion rate up, sales up, cost per acquisition down, everything you'd hope for. And then finally, we've got scarcity and urgency. So we all know like Amazon are the best at this. There's 2 left in stock. Order in the next 1 hour and get it tomorrow. Anything that's scarce, anything that's got a time limit on it, offers with a time limit, these things work really well. So trying to make people feel the urgency to buy. But we also need to think about the whole user experience, because it's more than, and especially as everyone on this call is an e-commerce business, the whole user experience spans from that early awareness through to the delivery and it arriving on your doorstep. And where we mentioned earlier, post-purchase regret, part of that is ensuring that that whole experience is wonderful. And this comes back to something known as the peak end rule. So when it comes to memory, we remember the peak of emotion and we remember the end. So we remember the peak. So if your website is really tricky to use and there was a moment where they were really frustrated and annoyed, or annoyed that they had to pay a certain amount for delivery, or annoyed they couldn't get it when they needed it, that's going to be the peak that they remember. And then they're going to remember the end. And the end from an e-commerce point of view is this lovely moment that you unbox what it is that's delivered. So actually, again, if that turns up as a soggy, half-broken box and you're worried that your product's been damaged, that's going to be a really bad experience and make you less likely to remember anything about it favorably. Even if the product's perfect at the end, that still could put a downer on it. So thinking about the peak end rule is really important. And then finally is test and learn. So we know who our audience are. We've journey mapped it. We've found the channels. We know how the channels are going to play together. We now know what we're going to say in the channels from a messaging and creative point of view, which comes back to understanding the audience and understanding where they are in their journey and their motivations. Now we need to test and learn, because we're not going to have got that right first time. 100%, like nothing's ever perfect first time. So test and learn. So you want to create a culture of test and learn in your business, and you want to ensure that those that are in senior positions that you're reporting into, that they get this and that they know that marketing is an ongoing experiment to get better results. So you want to build robust testing plans and make sure that you've got clear measurement frameworks, that you know what good is going to look like. What are you expecting to happen? And make it really robust and clear. And be clear what good looks like and tell everyone about that. Make sure everyone understands that, so that, because if you don't do this piece, people will be thinking, oh, I'm expecting so-and-so to happen. And if that's different to what you're expecting, then suddenly you're going to have a mismatch. There's been studies that have been done that show that the more tests you run, the better the results. And there's a really good reason for this. And that's because humans are a bit weird. Like, we don't always react how we expect humans to react. And the more tests that you put out there, the weirder things you start to test. So if you suddenly say, I've got to run 10 different tests on this campaign, you are going to push yourself to think about changing things that you never would have thought about testing before. And it will be some of those weird tests, some of those things that you're like, that will never have an impact, that has the best kind of impact. So you want to push yourself to think about those non-obvious tests. And that's where the magic happens. So let's wrap up, and we're going to have a few minutes just for questions. So turn off your ad blockers, go to the gym, the easiest workout you'll do. Plan for hard times before you're on the back foot. So think about this now. The fact that you're on this webinar is amazing. You're doing great. But now start to take action. Think about what you can do differently. Profile your audience and profile your products and be really clear on that. And if you need to do a bit of research to help that, do it, but do it sensitively. Be careful how you think about these things. And then make sure you start to market using your audience motivations. So understanding how they're feeling in current times, understanding what motivates them, what type of people they are, and run more tests than you think you can, because that's where the magic will be. And just do more than nothing from today. Like, just try something, but start to chip away at this, because we don't know how long we're in this difficult time for. So we really need to be sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. So thank you so much. I feel like I'm running out of voice. You can find me on LinkedIn. We're going to be sending around slides. We've recorded this as well. So this is going to be available for your team to watch back if you've got other people you want to share it with. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And I'm going to see if anybody has any questions, which you can either pop in the chat or you can come off mute and talk to me. I'm more than happy.